You ever get one of those letters in the mail that looks like it's just a bill, but when you open it, boom, it's basically a ransom note from your HOA? Yeah, this was one of those times. Only problem? The fine wasn't for trash cans or lawn length or even a mailbox color. Nope. My HOA said I owed them lake access fees on a cabin that's been in my family since before half the board members were even born. And if I didn't pay, they'd take action. Spoiler alert, their idea of action was a bulldozer. And their mistake? Forgetting who my family actually is. The cabin by the lake had always been more than just a getaway. It wasn't big, it wasn't fancy, but it was ours. Built by my grandfather's hands in the 60s, the place had been passed down like a piece of living history. Every summer, my parents would pack us kids into the car, drive down the winding gravel road, and let us run barefoot until the fireflies came out. For me, it wasn't just wood and nails, it was home, even if I didn't live there full-time. But HOAs? They don't see history, they see property. And properties mean fees, fines, and rules written by people with too much free time and too little perspective. So when a letter showed up taped to the cabin's door, scrawled with bold red ink, "Final notice. Dues past due," I thought it was a prank, except it wasn't. The letter went on to say the HOA was demanding back payments for a mandatory lake maintenance fund. According to them, I owed $4,300. According to me, I owed them squat. Why? Because my cabin was grandfathered in. Literally. The land predated the HOA, and when they formed in the late 90s, our property had been legally excluded. We were neighbors, not members. Still, Karen wasn't just a neighbor. She was a storm in yoga pants. Picture the type of person who writes complaint letters in cursive and thinks a clipboard gives her diplomatic immunity. That was her. She called emergency HOA meetings over things like unapproved wind chimes and illegal holiday decorations. So naturally, the fact that my family wasn't paying her precious lake dues was enough to keep her up at night. I first confronted her at a neighborhood barbecue. She cornered me next to the potato salad, waving her manicured finger like it was a sword. "You think you're special because your cabin's old? Everyone pays their share. If you don't, you'll regret it." I smiled, bit into a hot dog, and told her the truth. "Karen, my family doesn't belong to your HOA. We never have. We never will. So take that threat and save the postage." She froze, narrowed her eyes, and muttered something about making sure this doesn't end well for you. At the time, I thought it was just HOA bluster. But Karen was like a shark that smelled blood, and she had a board of equally petty neighbors backing her up. Started small. A fake warning ticket slid under my windshield wiper when I parked near the lake. Then emails, pages and pages of HOA bylaws copy-pasted, with highlighted sections they swore applied to me. The kicker? A letter claiming they had the right to lien my property if I didn't pay. That was laughable because legally they had no jurisdiction. But here's the thing about bullies. They don't need to be right. They just need to be loud. And Karen? She had volume for days. Neighbors started whispering. Some avoided me, not wanting trouble. Others asked if it was true, that I was freeloading, skipping out on community dues while everyone else paid. The social pressure alone was brutal. It felt like being tried in a court of public opinion where the judge was the nosiest woman on the block. But still, I held my ground. We're not paying. We're not members. End of story. Or so I thought. That fall, my parents and siblings met at the cabin for a weekend. The leaves had turned gold. The air smelled of wood smoke, and while the lake shimmered like glass, the tension was thick enough to choke on. Dad set his coffee mug down hard on the table. "They think they can scare us into paying, but they don't know who they're messing with. See, here's the thing I haven't told you yet. My dad? A retired federal marshal. My sister? FBI Cybercrimes Unit. My brother? ATF. Me? Let's just say my badge wasn't a library card either. We weren't just a family, we were a fortress. But we also knew the law, and the law said Karen had no leg to stand on. So we laughed it off, poured another round, and figured she'd eventually get bored and move on to policing mailbox heights. Spoiler, she didn't. Winter came. Snow dusted the cabin roof, Kids skated on the frozen lake, and Karen stayed oddly quiet. For months, no new letters, no threats, no confrontations. It was almost peaceful. Then spring rolled around. One morning, I drove up to the cabin to check on repairs. As I turned the corner, I froze. Parked in front of the cabin wasn't just a car, it was a construction truck. A bulldozer idled nearby, its engine rumbling like a predator. And standing there, clipboard in hand, was Karen. Her lips curved into a smug smile. You didn't pay. Now you pay the price. Before I could even process it, she waved her arm, and the crew started moving. That's when I realized this wasn't about dues anymore. This was war. And let me tell you something, when Karen ordered that bulldozer forward, she thought she'd won. She thought she'd finally shown us who held the power. What she didn't know, she'd just woken up the wrong family. And the next move we made wasn't just personal, it was federal. The crunch of tires on gravel is a sound I'll never forget. It wasn't just the bulldozer. It was the sound of my entire family history grinding beneath steel tracks. I jumped out of my truck, heart pounding, and shouted, "What the hell do you think you're doing?" Karen didn't even blink. She stood there in her pastel cardigan, sipping an iced latte like she was directing traffic at a bake sale. Clipboard in one hand, smug grin in the other. "Removing unauthorized property," she said. "You've had months to comply. You didn't. So now it's coming down." The demolition crew hesitated. You could tell they weren't sure about this. They glanced at me, then at Karen, then back at the cabin. They weren't used to destroying someone's vacation home on the word of a middle-aged suburban dictator. I tried reasoning. This cabin is exempt. Legally exempt. You have no authority here. Karen raised an eyebrow. Authority is what people let you have. And right now, everyone else on the board agrees with me. So, she waved her hand. Proceed. The bulldozer roared to life. I ran forward, but two workers stepped in front of me. "Sir, you need to back up," one muttered, clearly uncomfortable. And then it happened. The bulldozer's claw tore into the porch like it was paper. Wood splintered, glass shattered, and a lifetime of memories came crashing down. The sound was deafening, but worse was the silence in my chest. This wasn't just demolition. This was erasure. My grandfather's handiwork, the place where my mom taught me to fish, the old rocking chair on the porch. All of it was being reduced to rubble. Karen? She just stood there, phone out, recording the whole thing like she was live-streaming her victory to an invisible audience. That was the exact moment the switch flipped in my brain. I wasn't just angry anymore. I was done playing defense. I called my dad. He answered on the first ring. "They're doing it," I said, voice shaking. "They're tearing it down." There was silence on the other end. Then his voice, low and dangerous. "Stay put. We're coming." Within 2 hours, my entire family was there. Dad pulled up with that old look in his eyes, the one that said somebody had just made the biggest mistake of their life. My sister arrived with her laptop bag slung over her shoulder, already typing before she even stepped out of the car. My brother? He tossed a duffel bag in the dirt with a metallic clink that made the construction crew suddenly reconsider their career choices. We stood together, staring at the wreckage of the cabin. Karen strutted over like she owned the world. "Oh look, the whole family's here. Maybe now you'll finally realize rules apply to everyone." Dad didn't flinch. "Lady, you have no idea who you just messed with. Here's the thing about growing up in a family of feds. We don't just get mad, we build cases." My sister, the FBI agent, was already on her laptop pulling property records. Within minutes, she had the original deed up, stamped and dated decades before the HOA even existed. Clear as day, our property was excluded. Meanwhile, my brother was snapping photos of everything, the bulldozer, the wreckage, Karen giving orders. Evidence. And me? I was calling every contact I had. The county assessor, the sheriff's office, even a buddy in the DA's office. By the time the sun set, we weren't just grieving, we were building a legal war chest. But Karen wasn't done. The next morning, she showed up with a stack of papers. She waved them around like she was holding the Constitution itself. "You think you can scare me with your little cop family? Think again." The board voted. We have the authority. You were delinquent and we enforced compliance. Case closed. I took the papers. You know what they were? A bunch of poorly photocopied HOA bylaws with half the pages missing. Not a single one applied to us. When I pointed that out, Karen sneered. Doesn't matter. Perception is reality. And right now, everyone in this community sees you as the freeloaders who finally got what they deserve. That was her whole play. Bully, manipulate, gaslight. Make us the villains so she could look like the savior. But here's the problem with gaslighting a family of... The next morning didn't smell like coffee or pancakes. It smelled like revenge. My family woke up with one mission. Tear down Karen's empire without lifting a single bulldozer claw. Dad was already pacing with a notebook in hand. He didn't just want payback. He wanted a case airtight enough to make a judge slam the gavel so hard the bench cracked. My sister started with the HOA's finances. Within hours, she noticed something odd. The numbers didn't add up. Annual dues collected from homeowners? Check. Budget allocations? Sort of. But then, mystery maintenance fees with no receipts, administrative expenses that looked suspiciously like spa treatments, and a line item labeled Community Enhancement Project that had a 5-digit figure next to it. Except, nothing in the community had been enhanced. Unless you count Karen's backyard gazebo. She smirked. Classic embezzlement. She's been skimming off the top. If I had to bet, the entire board's in on it. Dad wrote it down. Fraud. Wire fraud if money crossed state lines. Keep going. Meanwhile, I went door to door. At first, neighbors were hesitant. Nobody wanted to speak against the HOA. Karen had cultivated a culture of fear, late fees, liens, threats of foreclosure. But when I told them what happened to my cabin, people cracked. One neighbor whispered, "She fined me $500 for leaving my trash can out for 2 hours." Another said, "They tried to evict my tenant for having a support animal. I didn't fight back because I didn't want to lose my house." And then an older gentleman leaned in, voice trembling. "I've been in this neighborhood 30 years. Karen told me if I didn't sign over a strip of my land to the community." My sister was still glued to her laptop, muttering like a hacker in a movie. "Got it. HOA meeting minutes." And, "Oh my God. You're not going to believe this." She spun the screen around. Right there in black and white. The board had held a secret vote to demolish unauthorized structures, even though state law prohibited it without a county court order. Not only that, they doctored signatures. At least 3 homeowners listed as in favor swore they'd never even been at the meeting. Fraud on top of fraud. Karen wasn't running a community board. She was running a crime syndicate with a bake sale aesthetic. That evening, Karen showed up again, this time with a lawyer in tow. Slick suit, shiny shoes, smile so fake it belonged on a toothpaste ad. "We hear you've been harassing board members," he said. Dad crossed his arms. "We hear you've been committing crimes." Karen huffed. "We don't answer to you. We answer to the community. And frankly, everyone's sick of your attitude." I laughed. Funny, because the community's been singing like canaries. We've got testimonies, records, and enough dirt to plant a forest. The lawyer's smile faltered. Karen tugged on his sleeve, whispering something. "They left in a hurry." That was when Dad said it. "They're scared." Which means we've got them exactly where we want them. Here's where the story took a turn Karen never saw coming. "Remember that my whole family's in federal service?" "Yeah." "That matters. My brother called in a favor from the DOJ. My sister sent the financials to a friend at the IRS. Within 48 hours, we weren't just building a civil case, we were building a federal investigation. Money laundering, fraud, extortion. We knew the next HOA board meeting would be the showdown. Karen strutted in with her lawyer, expecting another rubber stamp session where she held the gavel and everyone else just nodded. But this time, the room was packed. Neighbors, reporters, even a county official sat in the back row with a notepad. Karen started, voice dripping with condescension. "As you all know, we recently removed an unauthorized structure. This was necessary for the beautification of our community and..." Dad stood up, dropped a binder on the table with a thud that silenced the room. Unauthorized structure? You mean my family's cabin? The one legally excluded from your HOA jurisdiction? The one you bulldozed without a permit? Gasps rippled through the crowd. My sister flipped the binder open. We've got your fraudulent meeting minutes, your embezzlement trail, your intimidation tactics, and we've already forwarded. The week after the board meeting felt like Christmas morning, if Santa delivered subpoenas instead of presents. Karen and her cronies thought they could hide. They thought shredding documents, wiping computers, and deleting emails would save them. But my sister? She had already copied everything to an encrypted drive. When federal agents walked into the HOA office, they didn't just confiscate a few papers. They carried out boxes of records, computers, even the fancy Keurig Karen bragged about buying for community morale. Karen shrieked in the parking lot. This is harassment. You can't do this. One agent deadpanned. Ma'am, it's called a warrant. By the end of the month, Karen and 3 board members were facing charges. Fraud, extortion, misappropriation of funds, and, my favorite, destruction of private property. The neighbors who had once been silent victims suddenly found their voices. They lined up at the courthouse to testify. Every fine, every bogus violation, every intimidation letter, it all came out. One woman sobbed on the stand. She told me if I didn't pay $1,000 for painting my shutters the wrong shade of beige, she'd take my home. I almost lost everything. The jury didn't just look sympathetic, they looked furious. Now Karen loved power. She loved waving her clipboard, barking orders, and feeling untouchable. But in court, she crumbled. During cross-examination, our lawyer slid the fraudulent meeting minutes across the table. Mrs. Carter, can you explain why 3 homeowners listed as voting in favor of demolition all signed sworn affidavits saying they were never there? Karen stammered. Well, maybe they forgot? The courtroom laughed. Even the judge chuckled. Karen's face turned the color of a stop sign. When pressed about the missing funds, she muttered something about community dinners. The prosecutor fired back. But we weren't done yet. Remember, my family's federal. Dad called in an expert witness from the FBI's Financial Crimes Unit. This guy walked the jury through Karen's bank records like a Netflix crime documentary. Transfers, hidden accounts, even a suspicious wire to a cousin in Florida. By the end, the jury didn't just dislike Karen. They saw her for what she was. A thief in pearls. The defense tried one last Hail Mary. Karen took the stand herself, dabbing fake tears. I only ever wanted what's best for the community. These accusations are all lies from a disgruntled family who didn't follow the rules. But then the prosecutor pulled out photos of my demolished cabin. The jury saw the splintered wood, the broken dock, the place where my childhood memories had been bulldozed for nothing. Karen's crocodile tears evaporated. She froze. Everyone in the room could see the truth. The deliberation didn't take long. Guilty. On nearly every count. Karen gasped like someone had stolen her oxygen. Her lawyer packed up his briefcase without making eye contact. The other board members slumped in defeat. The judge, stone-faced but clearly fed up, said, Mrs. Carter, you abused your position,
I told them repeatedly,
exploited your
those
neighbors,
bushes are a
and
clear
destroyed
violation of
property
the
that was
community
never
guidelines,
under your
and
authority.
they just ignored me.
Sentencing is set for next month. Court is adjourned. The gavel slammed. It echoed like thunder. That night, the neighborhood wasn't quiet. It was alive. People gathered in the cul-de-sac with lawn chairs and coolers. For the first time in years, nobody looked over their shoulder for Karen. Neighbors who had been strangers hugged us, thanked us, told us we'd given them their freedom. Just when we thought it was over, my sister got a call. The IRS had found something else. Karen's been hiding assets overseas. This wasn't just HOA fraud, it was international tax evasion. Karen wasn't facing fines. She was facing years. But here's the thing. Karen's downfall wasn't just about her crimes. It was about what came next. The rebuilding, the justice, and how our community turned the ruins of my cabin into something bigger than any of us expected. After the verdict, I drove back to the lake. Where my cabin once stood was still just rubble and ash. The dock was gone, the fire pit buried, the walls reduced to splinters. For the first time in months, though, I didn't feel rage. I felt clarity. Karen had tried to erase our history, but what she really did was hand us a clean slate. As I stood there, my dad walked up beside me. "Son, we've got two choices. We let this place die, or we bring it back stronger." I didn't even hesitate. We rebuild. Funny thing about federal families, we know lawyers. Lots of them. Turns out, because Karen demolished the cabin without legal authority, the HOA's insurance company was on the hook. Add in the court's restitution order, and suddenly we had funding. Karen thought she'd destroyed us. Meanwhile, Karen's empire crumbled. At sentencing, the judge didn't hold back. "You abused power, destroyed property, and terrorized your neighbors. This community deserves peace, and you will not stand in their way again." Karen got 5 years in federal prison. The look on her face when the handcuffs clicked? Priceless. The other board members? Probation, fines, permanent bans from serving on any HOA ever again. Justice wasn't just served, it was microwaved, plated, and hand-delivered. With the board dissolved, the community elected a new one, neighbors who actually cared. They rewrote the bylaws, cut unnecessary fees, and made transparency the law of the land. Instead of HOA meetings being war zones, they turned into potlucks. People brought chili instead of complaints. The community that had lived under fear finally found freedom. Months later, I sat on the new porch at sunset, watching the lake ripple. My wife leaned against me, my family laughed inside, and the smell of barbecue floated through the air. A neighbor's kid ran up and asked, "Mister, can we fish off your dock?" I smiled. Of course, this place is for everyone. That's when it hit me. Karen thought she'd stolen our future. But all she really did was give us the chance to build something bigger than ourselves. The cabin wasn't just a building. It was proof that communities can rise, that bullies don't win, and that justice eventually shows up. Just when life felt normal again, my phone buzzed. It was my sister. "You sitting down?" I laughed. "Why?" "Because Karen's appealing her case. She thinks she was set up." I sighed, shook my head, and looked at the cabin glowing in the sunset. Let her try. She has no idea who she's dealing with. And for the first time, I realized something. This fight wasn't just about my family anymore. It was about every homeowner who's ever been pushed around, fined unfairly, or bullied by power-drunk HOA Karens. Our cabin became more than a home. It became a warning. Don't mess with people who fight back. So the next time Karen comes knocking on your door with a clipboard, remember this. Power only works when people stay silent. Speak up, fight back, and maybe, just maybe, you'll find your own cabin moment. Now, I want to hear from you. Have you ever dealt with an out-of-control HOA? Drop your story in the comments. Don't forget to like, subscribe, and share this with someone who's ever gotten one of those ridiculous HOA violation letters. Because together, we're louder than any clipboard.